and be glad in it. I want to welcome you to the Hope TV and certainly give you a great deal of appreciation and gratitude for your support for following the Hope TV. We've been doing media a long time. We ramped up our efforts significantly when the pandemic started. And our first broadcast was on March 19th, a series called Pastoring in a Pandemic. And since that time, from March 19th until now, we've grown from that one show to 18 shows throughout the week. And in 30 days, we've topped 5 million viewers throughout all of our platforms. I just want to thank you for your support. It's been incredible. Your kind words have meant the world to us. We're just trying to bring some positive programming and some good news during a difficult time. Our aim is to bring you programming that will minister to people spiritually, mentally, as well as physically. Everything that undergirds our programming here is, of course, dealing with faith, and family, and finances, fitness, our faculties, fellowship, and then interjecting some fun along the way. So I appreciate you. So if you're watching the Hope TV and you've not yet followed us, please follow us on all things social media. There's a new YouTube page that you can subscribe to. That way you can get notifications when different programs are being offered. You can follow us on Hope TV on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, all things social media, and also our new platform called Twitch. So thank all our Twitch followers. So if you're following from Apple TV, Roku TV, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, on the House of Hope Atlanta website, the edewittsmith.org website, or the House of Hope app. However you're watching, I want to thank you for tuning in today. I'm excited about it. This is your daily dose of hope. We're hope dealers here, and we hope that you're inspired and that you are encouraged. This is one of my favorite shows because it's called One-on-One, and we get an opportunity to interview some incredible people who've made some tremendous strides in their own fields and professions and are making a difference in terms, whether it be athletics, whether it be business, whether it be politics, sports. And of course, we've had persons on here. We've had some NFL players on here. We've had some movie execs, directors on here. We've had some political activists and politicians on here. So we just had a wealth of people, a plethora of people on here. And today I'm very, very excited to have our guest who's going to be on with us today. I had the privilege of meeting him some years ago, and his spirit, personality was magnetic, and just his focus. He's an incredible, incredible brother. He's a graduate of Florida A&M, graduated with one of the members of our church, Rob Hardy, and their fraternity brothers. I think they're LBs too. And that's such a bond they have. And of course, Rob and Will Packer, all friends, and they share a very close bond. He started out at FAM with those guys that came up, and he has just blossomed phenomenally. He's the CEO of Liquid Soul. He's a media executive. Had some incredible projects. He's moving to directing and producing, and not just the distribution of content. Just an incredible brother. He's a deacon in his church. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a man of God. He's socially conscious and has a heart for his community, and I respect him dearly. I want to welcome to One-on-One today my brother Tirrell Whittley. What's up, Tirrell? How you doing, man?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much, Pastor, for having me and for the kind words.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean it from the heart. I don't just throw out pleasantries. Sometimes we just say things, be saying things, but it's good to say it, and you can mean every word you say. Tell us a little bit about your background. I've had a chance to meet your dad and your brother, and kind of see your roots and how you developed. So tell us how you got from where you were to where you are right now.
Sure. So I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and yes, there are Black people in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. Few of us. I migrated out of there, as you mentioned, and went to Florida A&M. Found my bride on campus. It was her second day, my third day on campus, and we've now been together almost some 29 years, and been married, I think now coming up on 26. So I've been blessed in that capacity. Have 2 girls, one just as a graduating senior, and a 16. One just turned 16 next week. So I'm in a house full of women. So thus I'm at my office today, so I could find my happy space. What's great is I've always had this spirit of business and entrepreneurship. Even when I was a young man, I used to cut hair. I had a little barber shop in the basement, had my little red light, and had my little chairs down there. And I used to cut hair. Because I was in Wisconsin, I had a lawn mowing company, but then in the winter months, I would go out and shovel snow. I have a twin sister. And I tell my father sometimes that I know he loves her a whole lot more than he loves me because she was the princess of the house, whereas for me, he was like, "Hey, get out there and go make a way for yourself." But it instilled in me tremendous work ethic and a spirit to really go out and seek to discover things like how to be an entrepreneur. My dad was a great he had a great job with the transit system in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, worked there 36 years. And I had these small businesses. And then when I went to FAMU, I actually started my first two companies. I had a graphic design company called Fly Productions and a web development company and called Midnight Online. And after those two companies, I decided to get married, and I went to corporate America. And I think the corporate America experience for me was critical because it allowed me to kind of basically mess up on somebody else's dime. And I got a chance to learn and get some experience. And what I say is I created my tool belt. I had almost like Batman who has his utility belt. I was able to add things to my utility belt while going through corporate America. But I always had the itch to get back into business for myself. But having that foundation allowed me to get my finances right. I got my credit score right, paid off my student loans, and I was very diligent in my tithing and my giving and my philanthropy. I gave back to the university. So I tried to be very astute, even in my young age. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was married and I was focused in that space. And from there, I started Liquid Soul. I was an executive at the time with a company called SAP, which is a software company. I was a 29-year-old, one of the youngest executives here in Atlanta. I had these huge clients like Coca-Cola and Home Depot and Cox, where we would implement this business intelligence solution through SAP. And while the money was good, while the work was good, I didn't have freedom. And I felt constrained. And so I became what they call a passionpreneur. I started my company while I was working corporately, and I took a lot of my corporate bonuses and other things and I would reinvest it into my company. Now, the great thing is I had eliminated my debt situation, before that is led to where I could spend money on my company. And I had a believing wife. Let's say it that way. She believed in me. And I think I gave her reason to believe because I was being true to my word on the things that I would do for her and for our family. And thus, I started the company while I was at SAP. And I remember clearly the time when they had layoffs. This was probably in, early, maybe 2002, somewhere in there. And I saw people around me with families and, a lot of heavy expenses, and they were being laid off, and the pressure that they felt was something that always stuck with me. And I said that to me was something I never wanted to feel. And that's where the company became my freedom space. Well, I grew the company over time, and we worked with great people like Will Packer and Rob Party. We helped them with their first film, which was called The Gospel. Most people don't know their first film was a faith film with Idris Elba and Boris Kodjoe, as a matter of fact. Great movie.
Indeed.
And we did quite well off of that film. And from there, I was able to get into the entertainment system and begin doing more and more film. Well, the company, Liquid Soul, grew. And as a matter of fact, while I was still at SAP, I was running $1 million agency and kind of balancing both. And I had a staff, and luckily I had a little bit of juice on my corporate job where I could kind of float a little bit. But I hit a breaking point where my tax accountant said, "Hey, this isn't making a lot of sense, for you financially. I mean, I don't know what you're trying to do, but health-wise," he said, "you're going to drive yourself to an early grave if you try to balance the world on a pen." And so I made the conscious and tough decision to say, you know what, SAP, I'm going to leave you. And I have a book title for this. I said, my bishop, which is the former Bishop Ron Saylor Sr., we used to talk about this, which was you can't be excellent in your spare time. And
Wow.
so that's what I was trying to do.
Wow.
I was trying to be excellent in my spare time. And I
Gee.
had to take both feet and jump fully in to my passion. But the great thing is I had great preparation. So when I jumped in, I didn't jump in thinking, okay, what's going to happen? I kind of already had some utilities around me because of that utility belt where I was already moving and shaking. And so it was really an excellent transition. And interesting enough, things just began to skyrocket from there. God has been really faithful. And I tell my wife this all the time. He has this very evident favor that sits on my shoulders that I highly respect. And my job is just to be obedient and carry out his will and way, while I help others as they try to seek their path.
So let me ask you this question. So you start out with SAP, you're an entrepreneur in terms of being a barber, you
Mm-hmm.
doing your graphic designs and your web management. So, and SAP offered business solutions to major companies. So how did you transition from SAP into entertainment? I know you talked about the Gospels and that movie. We rented out a whole theater to take our
Yeah.
church when it came out. But my question is, with SAP, were you doing media? Were you involved in anything media? How did you make that shift?
Not really. So interesting enough, it's a great story. So around 1999, which for the young people, for the millennials, there was a space called Y2K. And I was actually in Houston working with this chemical company called Lyondale. They recruited me, SAP recruited me out of Lyondale. But a lot of my counterparts were going to these .coms, which effectively were websites, but they were making, they would be sitting next to me one day, the next day they're saying, hey, we got $10 million and we're going to start a .com. And
Wow.
I had just got married and I just didn't feel I could take the risk at that moment. Like we were just getting established. Getting ready to buy our first home. And so I had to sit still. There was a certain level of patience I had to show. And so what I did is I started looking across the landscape. Now I kind of glossed over this part. So I started looking over the landscape and I said, okay, I was in technology, but I said in media, I like media. And I said, but what else of media is going to change based on technology? And I knew that it was going to happen. TV has changed, streaming has changed, radio, everything, newspapers are gone, print magazines have changed. I knew that things were going to change, and .com was showing me kind of the way to the future. I decided initially to go into internet radio, right? So when I first came to Atlanta, I started what was called Liquid Soul Radio. Some people may be familiar with it. Liquid Soul Radio was 24 channels of urban music that streamed. You had to have it in your computer, and most people listened to it at work. And we had some great stations. We had merengue, salsa, broken beat, but the people's favorite station was it was called This Is the Remix. And it was a station full of just remixed tracks. I had 15 music directors and program directors, and I invested all of this money into Liquid Soul Radio. We had a great website and independent artists, and we even had a concert series with a guy named Ian Burke who ran ASCAP here in Atlanta. So we had a concert series for independent artists, and all the artists that came through Hidden Beach, like Jill Scott, Mike Phillips, Kindred and the Family Soul, Jeff Bradshaw. We would throw concerts with them headlining and then put independent artists with them. Now, it was a great model. I invested heavily. We were making no money. Nothing was coming through the door. And I eventually was able to get 3 sponsors. My 3 sponsors were Motorola, Denny's, and Pepsi Bottling. Now, here's the interesting thing. Those are 3 great companies. And
Indeed.
I knew that I could sell, like I could close deals. I just couldn't get the advertisers to believe in internet radio. They actually sponsored my concert series. So we had money coming in now. Well, the other client that came on board was Hidden Beach and Motown. And they said, hey, you're throwing these great concert series and you got the radio station and you got a sponsor. How about you do the advertising for our artists and help us launch these artists? So we got involved in that. And that's really what kind of matriculated. So when Rob and Will were doing movies, I was doing marketing and music and concert series. And the way God set it up was that when they had that movie, The Gospel, that movie was originally supposed to go to DVD. Rob and them shot such a great film, and we started, they gave us a little money, meaning the studio actually gave Will and Rob a little money. Will and Rob hired me and said, brother, we got a little change. Can you help us create this campaign? Well, remember, we were already doing all the internet stuff and radio. So I was like, sure, we'll just do for you the stuff that we're already doing. And you guys are going to pay us for it. So we created this campaign for The Gospel, and it just took off. T-shirts, there are churches right now that still got church fans from The Gospel. I'm certain of it. So we had church fans all around the country, and all of these other promotions that we were doing. And when the studio finally looked up, they said, this film is tracking. Like, this is something big. They've created something here. And Rob and Will had already paid me. And this was the special part. This is really when I decided to go marketing. Will and Rob had already paid us to do all of this work. Well, the studio called and said, hey, we have to buy all the rights to all of the materials. And so I sat back and said, so they already paid for it, but you want to pay me again? I said, okay, I'll take that. I'll take 2 checks for one job. And I didn't even know what to charge them. And the funny thing is, when we got on the phone, I said something like, hey, yeah, we'll charge, the price is $25,000. And the $25,000 was probably the largest single check we had received to date at that time. And the man said, great, okay, we'll send a check. He said it so fast that I was like, oh, man, I know I undersold myself. He got all of this for $25,000 and was like, great. So, but at that moment, I said, you know what, there's an opportunity here, because while the industry hired all of these little consultants, they had never hired an agency and seen what we had delivered in a packaged format. And so I decided, well, let me focus on that. And I did something very real. Now, as a business owner, remember, the great part was I was a passionpreneur. So the company wasn't funding my life, so I could take some risks. So I decided on the Liquid Soul radio side, I said, instead of this 24 channels of music, we're going to come down to one stream, which was called Liquid Soul Elements. And we streamed that on the internet and on XM satellite radio. It was called like XM 61, The Flow, with Tracy Luttrell out of DC, who's a great person. She gave us a great opportunity. So we programmed her station on XM. So we were one of the first internet and satellite broadcasters.
Wow.
And then I decided I had to get rid of all of that 15 music directors, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, listen, let's create this media company and focus our efforts now on movies. Now, remember, I had those 3 clients, Denny's, Motorola, Pepsi Bottling. I sent them all nice little letters and said, hey, while it's been great, we now are basically we would like to be released from our contracts. It was a bold move, but I told the team, because I was still working too, I said, we have to focus. And I tell them this to this day, you have to become an expert at something and fill the lane completely. So that when a topic comes up in the room, you need to be the first vision that comes in the decision maker's mind. So in this instance, if a movie executive was thinking, hey, we have to reach the Black audience or the faith audience or HBCUs or Black families or mothers, the first thing I want them to think of is, let's just call Liquid Soul. Like, why are we even trying to figure that out? And so, but I told the team, we had to become experts at that. The qualified, certified experts. And then within the company, I told each of them, you have to become experts in your discipline so that when topics come up, I know who to point to say that's your role, that's your job. But the key is expertise, not general. Don't be general and say I need to know a little something. Become an expert at your space.
Wow. And so from SAP to the Gospels, and now from online radio, and now, I was so amazed when I went to the festival, a film festival here, and
Bronze Lens.
Bronze Lens, yeah, Bronze Lens.
Mhm.
I go to the festival to, with some friends to check out this this debut of a few shows and meet some friends because I'm doing film as well. Run into you and find out that you're the president or chairperson of the foundation, whatever. And then I'm getting a chance to actually sit down and watch a movie that you are debuting, the Brian
Yeah.
Banks story. So I've known you for TV. I've known you up
Yep.
to that point for doing some the marketing side, I guess,
Mhm.
and fundraising side for an aspect. But now you are executively producing the Brian Banks story. How did that transformation come about?
That's a great one too. So we were working with Tyler Perry for quite some time, and Tyler, who's a very special. I mean, we all know Tyler's a special guy, but there's these nuggets that he drops on people in very unique ways that I think it really takes root and it sees. He dropped a seed on me that just really I had to fertilize and make some core decisions on. What Tyler said was, Tirrell, you've done a great job marketing and doing all this stuff, but you put a lot of nails. You've hammered a lot of not a lot of boards into other people's houses. You popped in a lot of nails. These are other people's houses, but it's not your house. You're not hammering enough nails on your own house. So while you're over there building Disney, Universal, Sony, and Lionsgate, what about your house? And I thought back on that and said, you know what? You're right. And they pay me for a service, but I don't own it. Tyler's difference was he was like, they pay me too, but I own it. I own all of this. And that really changed my perspective to say, while people can still pay me to market their films, I know the audience. I know how to market it. I know who to market it to, where to market it. Why shouldn't I market my own movies or my own television shows? And so I took it upon myself to connect with some people that could understand that vision. And I said, well, let me test this out. And I did the Brian Banks film. Then I had been working on a movie for a very long time, which was Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace music documentary film. That film won an NAACP Image Award. It was, really my first award, and it was an Image Award. And I was like, wow, I think I really have a knack and an eye for this. And so since then, I've been able to line up several different films, which we shot one film this fall, which was the Aretha Franklin biopic with Jennifer Hudson called Respect. So I helped, kind of amass some things for that film. And now I'm working on a great film, which is a really one of my favorite projects, which is called Hammer. And Hammer is the Hank Aaron biopic. I like telling these stories. I like telling our stories. Tyler said something recently. I was watching one of Kenya Barris's new shows, and it was a little brash, but Tyler said some things which was, he's unapologetically Black, and he wants to tell Black stories to Black people in a Black way, and he does, and he's been very successful at it. I think he has carved out his lane. I want to tell our stories too. We've had such great success. I didn't say this earlier, but my agency, Liquid Soul, has done marketing for over 30 #1 films, 5 Academy films, and then 150 other films that have grossed $3 billion. So everything from Black Panther to Red Tails to Ride Along, To Think Like a Man, To Stump the Yard. I can go on and on. Moana. We've done animated films, action films, Dark Knight, Captain America. But then we also launched big TV shows like Empire. We worked with Turner on House of Pain. We did Power for Stars. We also worked on Game of Thrones for HBO. So I feel as though, remember that discussion about being an expert? I felt at that juncture like, listen, and my wife said this after I think after we did our 20th #1 film, she was like, so what major difference does 21 have? Are they going to pay you more money? Is something drastically going to change? And I was like, not necessarily, other than I know my craft. I am an expert. Now the question is, where am I going to leverage my expertise? And this has now been my new space to deposit my expertise, is in delivering my own films.
You know, one of the things that I respect so much about you is with all the incredible accomplishments. You listed so long, I couldn't even name all of them, you know, but you have managed to maintain your core values of who you are. You know, you're the same guy. The consistency of who you are, you know, the humility. And at the same time, in that world of entertainment, but when I look at your wife and look at your children, I still see the gleam in their eyes about you, and vice versa. How have you navigated managing all these incredible accomplishments that you probably never fathomed, but still maintain the stability of your family as a husband and as a father? How have you navigated those things?
Wow, that's a great. Well, I think #1 is my faith. I am a faith walker. You mentioned it earlier. I'm a deacon. I was brought up in the church. I'm connected. I have a relationship. I have a real relationship with Christ. I know, like I said earlier, there's a certain level. There's a robe of a favor that has been, put on my shoulders, but I also realize the responsibility of having humility. And as there's a poem where you have to walk with kings but keep a common touch. That's the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling. And I grew up, my dad was very modest. My dad was real cheap. Let me keep it real. He was tight, man. But and he was hard. He came from a military background, and luckily I grew up in a household with a father and a mother, and well structured. I had my younger brother and my twin sister. We were middle class per se from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but Dad was real focused, and I watched him. I didn't like it when I was young. I didn't understand it. Today, I tell people I don't know anyone richer than my father. He owes no man. The money he has is his money. He does what he wants to do when he wants to do it. He has what I consider to be complete prosperity, which are three things. #1, he has great health. #2, he has great joy. The man laughs and smiles all the time. #3, he has total peace. He is never looking over his shoulder. He has done no man wrong. He has peace. That to me equals prosperity. So I've been watching that. And then he and I went through something together. My dad is a prostate cancer survivor. I'm a prostate cancer survivor. I went in for early detection when I knew that he was diagnosed, and I discovered that I had cancer. And so we share that bond of being survivors. And so the humility really comes into play when you start looking at the greater spectrum of life. And I ask people this question sometimes when I interview them, which is a real deep question for some people. They really get blown back by this. Instead of asking all the niceties, I say, what do you want your legacy to be? And when your grandchildren are standing above your grave, what is it that you want them to say about you? And let that become your destination. Not all of these, because what they won't say is, well, granddad made billions of dollars, but they want to. You would, I believe, you would want your grandchildren to say, "Granddad was a great, fun guy. He treated people right. He made people laugh when they hurt. He gave a arm and a shoulder for them to cry. When people were in need, he showed up. Those are the things that ultimately matter. All of these other things are just part of a process of defining who you ultimately want to become. And so I tell people, even if you get this job, help me understand how this job is going to connect to your ultimate destiny. And if you don't see that, let's help. Let me help you, or let's figure out what that looks like, so that this job just doesn't become another stepping stone. It becomes, what I would hope, it becomes a key asset in your matriculation to where God ultimately wants you to be and where He's called you to be. And I'm just a conduit for that. I have no glory in it. There's no response. My only responsibility is to do my part. So I've tried to be honed against that as much as possible.
Man, you're just an incredible guy, man. I appreciate your time, and this is a rich conversation. I just appreciate how you navigate, man, and just who you are. I mean, just your being. Your accomplishments are one thing, but who you are is a whole nother ball game. And I appreciate the consistency between the two. I want to ask you two more
Thanks.
things.
Sure.
We've had some conversations about the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
and some of the subsequent decisions that have been made by our governmental officials. I just want to get your take to those who are listening in terms of what you think our posture should be. Those who are shelter in place, and those who are quarantined. Just to get your take on what you think has happened, so our people can be edified. I've been hammering so much every day. I think sometimes people need a different voice. I just want the people listening to get some perspective from you. What do you think our posture, our position should be during this pandemic?
A few things. I think number one, remember I said earlier how I was a cancer survivor. I found out my dad had cancer. I went in for early detection. I wasn't afraid to find out my health position. I would hope that anyone right now that thinks they're sick or that's having an issue, they got to go get tested. Yeah, it's selfish, in my opinion, to focus on just yourself and your needs and not the needs of others. So I think getting tested is one of the first things I would tell someone to do. I think with our government and what they've done, we have to get past, specifically Black and brown people, we have to get past looking for the next handout and start figuring out how to save ourselves. And what I mean by that is there was a spirit at one time in our country where we leaned on each other and we went to each other for resources and relationship. And everything wasn't always about a transaction or exchange, but it was more about how can I make sure that the people around me are doing well? Because if everyone is doing, to a certain degree at well at a level, we all have the opportunity to rise. So I think within that, this is where our entertainers, sports people, our clergy, as well as our politicians have to find common ground and discuss solutions, not just keep talking about the problem. In those solutions, then we all have to give something to the solution to say, okay, how do we make this work? And that's why I try to reach out to my relationships and the few people I know to say, how can I help bring this all together? Finally, I think we have to hold those in power responsible. Furthermore, we have to speak truth to power. So by holding them responsible, know the power of your vote. So when it comes time, if you don't like what's happening in your community, in your state, or in your country, you personally have an opportunity and a responsibility to get out there and demand change. What's real interesting right now is I wonder how many people have ever called their state senator or their representative or their mayor or even just a local politician, someone on the city council. These people work for us. Those are our tax dollars. All of this stimulus money, that's actually our money. That is our money going back into our pockets. So don't assume that anybody's giving us a gift. This is what we work hard for these things, but we have to hold those people responsible by saying, okay, why am I not seeing testing in this area? Why do I not see doctors here? And if when enough people have enough outcry and they use the power of presence, meaning they say, hey, let me call other people around me on the same position, that's how you impact change. So that's that part of saying, let's figure out how to work together. It can't be everyone out for themselves. And I think many of us, and I know I'm talking long, but many of us
No, it's
have
great.
been romanticized by what the Joneses have and what they see and what they think is success. So people believe if I have a car and a house and clothes and I'm good, I'm solid, you get yours. I'll tell you this, if my neighbor is bad, if my community is, if my people are bad, I'm bad. You can't separate me from the whole. And when you allow people to do that to us, that's where I think we fall into the trap. I say this final thing. My neighbor is from Pakistan. Great guy. Here's one thing that I look at. Him and all his friends, they all own gas stations, right? Many people from that country or from that area of the world, that's an industry that they own. When they go into the nail salons, I see more Koreans and Asians. That's an industry that they own. I step back sometimes and I say, okay, what is it that we own? And some people would say, well, we own the barbershops and the beauty salons. And I was like, yeah, that may be true. But a lot of the products that we use, we don't own all of those products. So, I would hope that even as we come out of this pandemic, but also this economic crisis, we would begin to step back. And what Tyler said to me, I would hope other people would take heed to that is stop hammering nails and boards in other people's houses. Let's now figure out how do we project, interject, and build our own and protect our communities. That's what's critical for my kids, for yours, for our generations to come, is to say that we made a conscious decision in 2020 never to get in this position ever again. If we could do that, that would mean more than anything to me.
That is absolutely incredible, my brother. And I mean, thank you. You said one thing, and I want to close with this. You said one thing about, the brilliance. I was blessed to see both of them. The Aretha Franklin documentary that, you won the award for. Brian Banks' story, I was able to see that. Was able to go through and see some of the shooting for the, Aretha Franklin movie. And also you work on the Hammer for Hank Aaron. But now everything is shut down production-wise.
Yeah.
AMC, movie theaters, now Netflix. My question would be, how do you see TV and movies and film going forward after the pandemic? Will that be a new normal in terms of entertainment and what you do specifically once this is subsided?
There will be a new normal. There's a pivot taking place in the industry right now. I picked up a couple streaming clients. Streaming is through the roof. The Academy announced yesterday that they're going to allow streaming content to actually qualify for the Academy Awards, the things that have not gone to the theaters. There's a company, Universal, put a movie out just over streaming, which was paid SVOD, and Regal and AMC took offense. Now, do I think people will still want to enjoy the theater, communal aspect of watching a film? Yes. I think once we get to a position where that is healthy and safe, I think people will be back in theaters. But I do also believe that the industry is going to have to mature and look at the fact that right now streaming and the availability of content on my own time, in my own space, when I want it, where I want it, will become very prevalent. So as a content creator, I have to now be conscious of that fact and begin to look at where and how I move in pitching my projects. As a matter of fact, I talked about pitching a project to someone this morning, and I told him, I said, hey, while we were looking at possibly doing a studio, I really think we should consider this particular project for streaming. I think that's going to become even more prevalent. But my hope is that people still will want and desire and demand great content. Do not allow streaming and other platforms to dictate the quality of the narrative, the story, and or the projects that come forward. I think that's what's going to be important. But definitely, the industry is going to take a major shift.
So to the people who are watching now, who want to get into this, who've been pursuing their dreams, they are working at SAP and they're comfortable and they got this passion to do other stuff, but they're fearful to step out. What's your word of encouragement to that person who's watching, who this pandemic may be shifting them to do something different?
Oh, that's a great question.
How do you encourage them to pursue?
I love that question. First thing is pray. Before you get ready to do a bunch of stuff, and when I say pray, I don't mean say, hey, thank you, God, but no. I mean, you fall to your knees and you earnestly go before God and you ask him to send wisdom, to send people your way to help impact your life. Your fervent prayer will help alter the universe. The universe literally can shift in your direction, but it really depends on your posture and your attitude. If you are boastful, if you saying, I'm just going to go do blah, 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 I would tell you to fall to your knees first. Secondly, I mentioned this earlier, but you have to hone your craft. Don't be scattered over many different things. Become an expert at one thing. If there's just one thing that you can do exceptionally well, do that. Be the best at that. And from there, I tell people this: you climb the ladder, you can always cut across, and you can cut across at a very high level. Outside of my film companies, my other clients are AT&T, Walmart, Salesforce, General Mills, Coca-Cola. I have very high level clients, but that's because I've proven an expertise through film and television. They know that we're the experts. So I tell people, hone against that expertise. And then finally, I had to learn this over time, but make sure you put good people around you that will be invested in your vision. Now, the first thing is you have to have a vision, but then you find the right people that connect to that vision and allow for them to be great too. Don't become king of the mountain, the emperor. That I've learned there's no glory in that. You allow people to come in and leverage and use their expertise, learn how to say thank you, great job, wonderful to be working with you, encourage people the best possible way. They will go the distance. They will ride with you to the ends of the earth if they know that you have a certain level of humility, but you also have a great level of appreciation. So I would tell people, and while they're in corporate America, just enrich your utility belt. Take that project that no one wants to take, that they consider to be difficult. Go after that client that no one has been able to close, and you close them. Or take on that project that seems like it's too much, but you will come out of it learning so much more about project management and how to work with resources and how to manage people. Those are the experiences that become transferable when you start your own business, and it allows you to start the business with confidence. And that's a big part of it. Like, I have to know, I can't assume that I can go out and do this. I have to know day in and day out when I walk in this office, I'm the right guy to make this thing happen. And so that confidence, not arrogance, that confidence comes from being able to know that my utility belt is full, that I'm an expert in these spaces. Where I'm not an expert, I've hired people or I'm working with people that are, and so I can always toss to them. And that actually makes me look good because people say you hire excellent people. And then ultimately I try to reward those people and treat them fair so that they say, you know what, working for Tirrell, there's a lot of people that work for me. There's not one person that's going to say they ain't never been paid, that I didn't pay them fairly, that I didn't treat them right, that I did them wrong. That's not, I look for them to go find greater, bigger opportunities past Liquid Soul, but knowing that this this was a great place to be.
Brother, you're one of a kind, man. I respect you and I appreciate you immensely. And I continue to speak God's blessings on everything you do, on your family, on your health, on your business, your ventures, the stuff that's coming. We need your voice more and more, man. I thank you for taking time. I know you're incredibly busy, even in this pandemic, and for you to drop these nuggets like you have, you've been an invaluable resource to us in our community, and I want to thank you. And we're empowered, we're
I
blessed by it.
appreciate
So
you having me.
thank you much, my brother. I appreciate you,
Indeed.
guys. You've been watching this episode of One on One with Tirrell Whittley and yours truly. I hope you've been inspired. I hope you've been impacted. That brother is a heavy brother who shares some incredible things, and we apply it and not just be hearers, but doers. I think our lives can find some transformation, and we can be productive and find increase and not diminish, even during a time of pandemic. My friends, you've received several doses of hope here on the day, and I hope you're blessed and inspired. I got to log off, but I want you to be encouraged. I know things are difficult, but please know that we will get through this with the power of God. Please know this, that God is not intimidated about what we're facing, and he will see us through. We're going to close this broadcast now, but always remember this: if you will be good to God, God will be good to you. Until we meet again, take care. Peace.